If you're autistic, stop engaging in this positive form of projective identification. So, projective identification is when you basically think that someone is a certain way or is whatever, when that trait is applicable not to them, but is more applicable to you rather. So, an example of projective identification would be if someone if someone's a full blown alcoholic hanging out with a friend and they finish their drink a little bit too fast, and the alcoholic says, "Wow, you finished that drink too quickly. That's a sign of a problem." That's an example of projective identification because the person who is a full blown alcoholic is projecting the trait that they don't like about themselves, which is the fact that they're an alcoholic, onto the non alcoholic. But when people think about projective identification, they oftentimes think about only negative traits, but it can also be positive traits. So let me give you an example of this form of projective identification that autistic people engage in. When a neurotypical or a non autistic person does something or says something that is hurtful, um, towards the autistic person will oftentimes assume that the neurotypical person is not being intentionally hurtful. The reason why is because they'll think, well, I'm very rarely, if ever, intentionally malicious or hurtful towards other people. Therefore, if someone hurts my feelings, then they must be doing it unintentionally as well. This is a very dangerous form of projective identification that causes you to willingly ignore red flags in relationships, both platonic, familial, and romantic. So that's three, not both. So this is the thing: when you're autistic, you lack theory of mind. When you lack theory of mind, you lack the ability to understand how what you say and what you do impacts other people. So oftentimes you can end up unintentionally stepping on other people's toes. So the result of this basically basically this. I say A, I say something to someone without the intention of it being hurtful. The other person is hurt by it. The other person brings up the fact that they found what we say hurtful. I apologize even though that's not what I meant or I did not mean to hurt that person's feelings. Okay? We assume that that's what's going on in the mind of the non-autistic person when they say or do something hurtful to us, which is extremely dangerous because there are a lot of non-autistic people that when they deal with autistic people are intentionally hurtful in egregious ways. So when we engage in that form of projective identification, we're setting ourselves up for domestic violence, abuse on the extreme end of the spectrum, or just being treated like shit in general on the more mild end of the spectrum. And keep in mind, non autistic people, based off of very shallow first impressions, rate autistic people as less likable, less attractive, basically as lower in desirable qualities and approachable, etc. So, based off of this, they oftentimes do engage in malicious behavior towards autistic people. So, a lot of the times when non autistic people are being nasty, it's intentional, it's calculated because they already don't like us. So, assuming that they don't have bad intentions is oftentimes very dangerous. Now, that's not to say there never comes a time when non autistic people are unintentionally hurtful. There does. But a lot of the time, it is intentional. So, I think it's important that we keep our wits about us and that we don't view them through rose tinted glasses. I think what goes on is if I say something that hurts someone's feelings, the other person accuses me of doing it deliberately to be an asshole. And because I'm not trying to intentionally be an asshole, that makes me feel really bad. And I desperately wish that other people would extend me the courtesy of not assuming malicious intentions. But they don't. So I'm trying to put that energy out into the universe of not assuming malicious intent But that can oftentimes get me into trouble with certain nefarious and dangerous individuals. And I think it's important that we as autistic people be very mindful of this because we're making ourselves more vulnerable to people who oftentimes do have malicious intentions.